and human experience is closer than you think. Stephanie Epstein schooled me on all things music therapy for this episode of From Here to There. It doesn't just provide emotional support, music actually changes the brain. Listen in. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Tell everybody what the typical day is like for a music therapist.
There really is no typical day. It's really going to depend on the setting and the population that you're working with. So I'm a pediatric music therapist. So I work at Holtz Children's Hospital in Miami. I never know what my day is going to be when I walk in the door. You know, I have a caseload typically of anywhere between 15 to 20, 25 patients on any given day. I may go in and have an idea of who I want to try to see that morning. However, there's a good chance that I will get called to a unit to help with the procedure. I may get called to go help with an IV or a PICC line insertion or some other type of procedure that the patient needs to be able to stay calm and stay still and relax, help decrease and manage their pain and manage their anxiety. Or I get a call that I have a patient in active pain crisis and they already maxed out their pain meds for that hour, so I may get called to go see them. My days, I have to be ready to kind of go anywhere at any given time.
So 20 to 25 kids, that sounds like a lot. So if it's not distraction or helping them through a PICC line insertion or whatever, what is it, like a therapy session or is it more like entertainment? Explain that.
So music therapy is using music to work on non-musical goals. So it's definitely not entertainment. So we have to have an order for the patient to receive music therapy services, and there needs to be a reason that they're being referred for services. So if a nurse comes up to me and says, "Oh, hey, can you go see Johnny? They're bored and they really like music," I'd say, that's great that they really like music. However, is there a reason why they're being referred? Are they having a difficult time coping with their admission? Do they not have a lot of family or friend support? They're having difficulty. Are they having a pain crisis? Are they a new diagnosis and they need to kind of start working through that? The reality is that these are kids who are in the hospital, whether they're there maybe just for one night or they're there for a week, a month, a year, it's still an abnormal experience. So really, every child could definitely be eligible and receive services.
Tell us a little bit of the science behind this, how it benefits kids. Because I mean, I've heard things about like some types of music and art therapy might even have the same effect as painkillers.
Yeah, so everything that we do as music therapists is evidence-based. So everything we do is backed by research, backed by science. And so I don't just walk into a session and say, I want to play these 3 songs today for you because that's what I want to do. Everything is based off of the individualized needs of the patient. If you've ever been listening to music and all of a sudden you get goosebumps, you get chills. There's actually a scientific and neurologic reason for that, and how the music is affecting the brain, what areas of the brain the music is affecting, and why that elicits that type of physiologic response. And so different aspects of music, different characteristics, whether it be melody, rhythm, tempo, timbre, all of those things are processed in different areas of the brain. You hear a lot of people say, oh, music is a right brain thing. And that's completely untrue. Music is processed all over the brain bihemispherically. So what we do is we look at these areas that that different types of music are affecting different areas of the brain and figure out what we need to do. So this really comes into play when we're looking at like neurologic rehab. So if we have a patient who has maybe had a stroke or had a traumatic brain injury, let's say that the injury is in the left side of their brain in the temporal region, which is where our speech and language is processed. So they may not be able to speak because that area of the brain has basically those neurons have died. So the way that I like to explain it is that imagine that you're on, this is something that all of us South Floridians can relate to. Imagine that you're on 95 and there's traffic, surprise, surprise, and there's an accident and there is no way to get through that accident. So that's kind of how our brain works, is that our neural pathways start one place and end another place, and that's the only way they go. Now, let's say that there's a blockage there due to some sort of brain injury. What we can do, knowing how music affects the brain. So let's say specifically talking about rhythm and tempo is processed in a different area of the brain than speech and language. Whereas obviously singing is a speech function is processed there. So what we can do is use different types of music to help reroute those neural pathways, to help those neural pathways learn a different way around that and be able to come up with the same result. So you may see a patient who they may not be able to speak, but they can sing. We use that to our advantage and help retrain those neural pathways, retrain those motor functioning. And then once they get that down, then we can slowly fade the music out. So all that remains is the behavior, which is the speech.
Why aren't there more music therapists like in all wings of the hospital, like for adults?
So there are a lot of music therapists who do work with adults. The percentage of music therapists in the US who work with adults versus children is actually much, much higher. There are music therapists who work in, we always say it's from birth to death, even before birth, because there's music therapists who work with mothers through labor and delivery, to after death, because there's music therapists who continue working with the families of the bereaved families after the loved one has died.
Is there any information on music and memory? So maybe you're dealing with a patient who's had memory issues, but all of a sudden they're singing along to a song that they used to love like years back?
Yes, so there is a lot of research on that topic, especially with our obviously populations with dementia and Alzheimer's. Music especially tends to be stored very, very deep in the brain, especially with those songs from kind of our teens through 20s, early 30s. That really seems to be the songs that really, really stick with us, even when the rest of our memory has gone. I look forward to when my generation gets to be that age, we're going to be rocking out to like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Spice Girl. Like, they're going to be a rocking good time. But anyway, so because music is stored and processed, especially such a deep emotional area. So music not only affects the different behavioral areas of our brain, but also the emotional centers of our brain, to the amygdala, the hypothalamus. There's so many different characteristics and nuances of music. So not only all of the actual characteristics of music, but then we put the emotional aspect onto music. And there are still a lot of things that we can't explain on why music affects us the way that it does, because really we're just starting to realize the potential that music has to really affect all these areas and how it affects it and why it affects it. Music perception is so individualized. We have these visceral responses to certain songs. We can have triggers to songs too, especially when we're talking about our populations who've maybe been through any sort of trauma. Certain songs and certain things there could be some really some triggers that come up and have a very negative response. And so that's why it's so important to have a trained professional there to help process those feelings.
Tell me about your degree, or if anybody was interested in getting into that, what training did you have to get to this point?
Here in the US, you have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. Most of us have our bachelor's degrees in music therapy. It's always part of a school of music, so we take all of our regular music courses. Most music majors have to take at least 4 semesters of piano. We take semesters of guitar. We take methods courses. Then we have music therapy centered courses. So then we also have practicum or clinicals throughout the undergrad. So it's typically at least 4 semesters. A lot of schools now do 5, where the students are actually going out into the community, working under direct supervision of music therapists with actual patients or clients. We also then take a number of psychology courses. Most of us end up having minors in psychology because we take so many courses built in already. In my undergrad, I took an entire year of statistics and research methods. At the master's level, I took neuropsychology, cognitive neuroscience, neuroanatomy. Just the undergrad training is very, very intense. And then, you can go on to the master's level, you can go on to the doctorate level as well. Once you finish your undergrad, then you have to apply for an internship. So it's a full-time 6-month internship. We end up with, I believe, about 1,200 clinical hours.
Wow.
By the time we finish. And then you're eligible to sit for our national board certification. Music therapists work everywhere from schools, private practice, nursing homes, hospice, prisons, substance abuse centers, group homes. There's really a huge variety of populations that music therapists work with.
So how did you get into this?
When I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to go into music, but I didn't think I wanted to teach at that point. I'd always been really interested in psychology and counseling. And so I started just kind of researching, and I found music therapy. So I grew up in upstate New York, and there was a school about 2 hours from where I lived, Nazareth College up in Rochester, New York, and they had a music therapy program. I contacted them, set up a meeting, and it was just kind of one of those, as soon as I really started learning more about it, I was like, yep, this is for me.
So tell me, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to hold back your emotions, or you feel like, tears or whatever, you're only human, you're dealing with 20 patients a day, it feels like you could get really overwhelmed or burn out. So how do you deal with those emotions?
It's really difficult. I have my own therapist. I am a huge advocate of everybody having a therapist, whether you think you need it or not. I'm lucky that I have a really good team of colleagues, interdisciplinary colleagues around me, that I have a lot of people that I can go to and bounce off. But yeah, it's a really intense environment. The basis of our work is connecting with these people on a very personal, close level to help create those connections and create that strong therapeutic rapport. So, I mean, the stark reality is that I work in a children's hospital. And the type of hospital we are is that we see the sickest of the sick. When the kids at the other hospitals around this area get too sick for those hospitals, they come to us. We're one of the few places in the country that do multivisceral transplants. So that's multiple organs all at the same time. So we have kids from all over the country, Caribbean, South America, Central America, that come to us for these transplants. I mean, they're with us for months at a time. And, and typically they have to come back, for a long time. So, I mean, I have patients that I've known their entire life because they start with us when they're babies and they're coming back so often. And I really watch them grow up. We're a hospital, so patients do get really, really sick and patients do die. And it is really, really difficult because I have been there at the time of death. The family has asked me to be there. In those moments, my role is to be there as the therapist. So I have to keep it together. A lot of times I can't sing because I would get choked up. So I might just hum, or I might just be playing. I might just be playing my guitar. I might just be playing piano. I've been in many sessions where, I'm playing and I have tears rolling down my face. I also do recognize how much of an honor it is and how much of a privilege it is that this family has invited me into that space. I always say that I think death is way more personal and private than birth. And I just gave birth 6 months ago, so I know how personal that can be. So for a family to want me in that space for their child and for them is something I do not take lightly whatsoever. And so, if I do cry with the family and express that, as long as, I'm not getting out of control, I think that's completely appropriate. When I find myself in those situations where I do find myself getting overwhelmed, it's more than what would be typical. That's when I definitely seek out outside help. I may go to a colleague, I'll go to my therapist. I'll do a lot of my own processing. I do a lot of my own music making for my own well-being. It's really, really important to have those outlets. I think that's true of any profession. You need to have those things that are just for you, apart from your kids, apart from your spouse, apart from your job.
Yeah, that's great advice across the board. That, and that everybody should have a therapist. That's
Yes.
My motto too. So tell us about, as if you don't have enough going on, tell us about the Ukulele Kids Club.
So the Ukulele Kids Club it's actually an international now nonprofit. It was founded 6 years ago now. It's still relatively young, by a man named Corey Bergman and his wife Etta Bergman. So they founded this organization after their son passed away very suddenly. Corey had always been very into music and used music, and so he had started volunteering at a children's hospital, and he went into a room, and because the mom called him in and said, "Oh, my son plays guitar, can you come in?" So Corey went to go give him the guitar, and the kid went to go take it, but he couldn't reach his arms around it because of all of his lines, his IVs. He was laying in bed. So Corey came back and said, "Oh, you know what? I have a ukulele. That's a little bit smaller. Let me see if you can do that." It kind of just clicked there. Him and his wife started just buying ukuleles from a local music store to give out to kids when they saw them. and kind of telling their friends what they were doing. Their friends started handing them $20 here and there. So they kind of started this very organically, very grassroots. Then Corey started learning about music therapy and what it was and how it helped. So I reached out to him. He came down to where I was working and saw where I was working. And now we are up to 8,000 ukuleles donated. We donate to pediatric music therapists to use with our patients. So if a patient wants to learn how to play an instrument, whether it's working on pain and symptom management, developing a positive coping skill, something to focus on while they're in the hospital, emotional expression, we can use that. These patients can then take the ukuleles home with them. They are theirs to keep. And it's so cool to see, whether it's a child or a teen or a young adult, just kind of light up when they realize how easy it is to play and how quickly they can learn how to play it.
So if someone wants to help or donate or volunteer with the Ukulele Kids Club, where do they go?
www.theukc.org. And all of the information is on there. There's pictures, there's videos, there's news stories, there's tons of stuff. You can also look it up on social media, on Facebook, just Ukulele Kids Club. And so each ukulele costs $50. And that includes all of the shipping, all of the taxes, all of the fees, all of that, because we work directly with the manufacturer.
Will you play us off?
Let's see. I've been staring at the edge of the water long as I can remember, never really knowing why. I wish I could be the perfect daughter, but I come back to the water, no matter how hard I try. Every turn I take, every trail I track, every path I make, every road leads back to the place I know, where I cannot go, where I long to be. See the line where the sky meets the sea, it calls me, and no one knows how far it goes. If the wind in my sail on the sea stays behind me, one day I'll know. If I go, there's just no telling how far I'll go.
Yay!
That's definitely one of our, I'd say that, I think that one has almost overtaken Let It Go in popularity.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but now Frozen 2 is coming out, so.
I know, I'm going to have to learn a whole new, I'm a huge Disney nerd, so any day that I can sing Disney princess songs for my job, I'm totally okay with it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, no problem.